Noah and Sophia's wedding felt like something straight out of a storybook, each moment carefully woven together to create a night of pure magic. Excitement filled the air as the newlyweds made their way from the ceremony to the reception hall, their faces glowing with happiness. Their joy was contagious, spreading to every guest who followed, their laughter and chatter merging into a symphony of celebration. Inside the venue, the atmosphere was warm and inviting, a perfect blend of elegance and festivity. Tables were decorated with delicate floral arrangements and the gentle flicker of candlelight, casting a soft glow over the gathering. A jazz trio played softly from a corner, their smooth melodies mingling with the clinking of glasses and the hum of lively conversation. As guests mingled, servers moved gracefully through the crowd, offering glasses of champagne, and before the official speeches even began, toasts were already being raised in honor of the couple. Sophia moved effortlessly through the crowd, her laughter ringing out as friends and family surrounded her. The lights caught the shimmer of her gown, making her seem almost ethereal, her cheeks flushed with sheer happiness. Noah was never far from her side, always within reach to catch her hand or exchange a look that spoke volumes. Together, they navigated the room like two magnets, drawing people into their orbit, their love a visible, unspoken force that filled the space. The joy was palpable, as if their happiness had extended beyond them, becoming a shared experience among everyone present. Friends offered heartfelt toasts, reminiscing about the couple's early days together, their stories met with cheers and laughter. Family members exchanged knowing glances, delighting in the undeniable love they witnessed. Even the most reserved guests found themselves swept up in the energy of the evening, their usual hesitations forgotten in the sheer warmth of the occasion. Dinner itself was a celebration, with a menu designed to cater to every taste. The delicate clinking of silverware against fine china provided a rhythmic backdrop to the lively conversations at each table. Servers moved smoothly between guests, ensuring that no glass stayed empty and every plate was replenished. With each course, murmurs of appreciation rippled through the room, the flavors proving just as memorable as the company. When the wedding cake was finally revealed, a towering masterpiece of intricate icing and cascading sugar flowers, it was met with gasps of admiration and an enthusiastic round of applause. Not long after, all eyes turned to the dance floor as the band picked up the tempo, and the room burst into cheers when Noah and Sophia took their first steps together. Moving in perfect harmony, they followed the rhythm as if the music itself was guiding them, their guests encircling them, clapping and cheering with every graceful twirl. As their dance came to an end, the applause was thunderous, and within moments, the floor was packed, the energy infectious. Children giggled as they dashed around the edges of the dance floor, their laughter adding to the joyful chaos. Grandparents swayed gently to the slower melodies, lost in a quiet nostalgia, while Noah's best man, always the life of the party, led a group dance that had guests of all ages attempting the moves, some with impressive skill, others with pure enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Sophia's bridesmaids took over the floor with a perfectly synchronized routine that had the entire crowd cheering them on. In one corner, the photo booth became a hub of activity, with guests slipping on oversized hats and goofy glasses, snapping pictures that would soon find their place in the couple's wedding album. Just outside, a fire pit offered a peaceful retreat for those wanting a quiet moment. Beneath a canopy of twinkling string lights, guests gathered, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories, their laughter blending with the crackling of the fire. Amidst it all, Noah and Sophia moved through their celebration with effortless grace. They clinked glasses during toasts, posed for countless photos, and even took the microphone for a surprise karaoke performance, much to the delight of their friends. It was a night of pure joy, the kind of celebration that would be talked about for years to come, a perfect beginning to their new life together. Noah and Sophia's warmth and genuine appreciation radiated in every interaction, making each guest feel like a cherished part of their celebration. The toasts, which had begun during dinner, carried on well into the evening. The speeches were a perfect balance of heartfelt tributes and light-hearted stories, each one painting a picture of the love and admiration surrounding the couple. Noah's best man had everyone in stitches with wild stories from their college days, while Sophia's maid of honor brought more than a few to tears with touching memories of their lifelong friendship. Their parents spoke with a mix of pride and deep emotion, their voices thick as they welcomed their new son or daughter-in-law into the family. As the night unfolded, the energy in the room only grew stronger. The band eventually made way for a DJ, who kept the dance floor packed with an irresistible mix of timeless classics and modern hits. Guests danced freely, kicking off their shoes, loosening their ties, and letting the music take over. Laughter erupted when Noah's usually reserved uncle took the lead in a conga line, and a roar of applause followed Sophia's younger cousins as they attempted breakdancing moves with boundless enthusiasm. Even the shyest guests, those who normally avoided the spotlight, found themselves caught up in the infectious spirit of the night. One of the most unexpected moments came when Sophia's father took the microphone for an impromptu duet with his daughter. His deep, steady voice blended seamlessly with hers, leaving the crowd momentarily hushed before breaking into cheers. Not to be outdone, Noah soon found himself roped into a dance-off with his cousins, the entire room erupting with laughter as he dusted off moves he hadn't attempted since his teenage years. The celebration stretched late into the night, a whirlwind of joy, laughter, and unfiltered happiness that seemed to defy the passage of time. Every second was a testament to the deep bond Noah and Sophia shared and the profound impact their love had on those around them. It was a night no one in attendance would ever forget, etched permanently in the hearts of all who had the privilege of witnessing it. The festivities carried on, the dance floor alive with movement, music vibrating through the space, and laughter filling every corner. Glasses were raised again and again, toasts to the newlyweds flowing freely, the warmth of love and camaraderie almost tangible. It was a moment Noah would never forget, a celebration of their love, surrounded by all the people who mattered most. Then, just as the band transitioned into an upbeat tune that drew even more guests to the dance floor, Sophia's phone vibrated on the table. She had just taken a moment to rest, sipping her champagne, when the screen lit up. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, just a flicker of hesitation, a slight press of her lips. She glanced at the caller ID, her brows knitting together briefly before she abruptly stood, the legs of her chair scraping against the floor. "I'll be right back," she said lightly, her voice even, as though nothing was out of the ordinary. But no one noticed it, a faint tremble in her fingers as she gripped the phone. Without another word, she wove quickly through the crowd, heading toward the restroom. Noah tilted his head slightly, watching her disappear into the crowd. It wasn't unusual for her to take a call, both of them had lives beyond their relationship, but something about the way she moved felt off. For a moment, he considered following her, just to check in. But then he shook the thought away. This was their wedding, a night of celebration, and the last thing he wanted was to overthink things or come across as controlling. "She's probably just handling something minor," he told himself, forcing away the unease creeping into the back of his mind. Turning back to his guests, he put on a warm smile as congratulations and laughter surrounded him. Yet, even as he chuckled at one of his groomsmen's jokes, his gaze kept flicking toward the door Sophia had disappeared through. Inside the restroom, Sophia leaned against the counter, her breath shallow. Pressing the phone to her ear, she listened as the voice on the other end spoke in hurried, urgent tones. Her face drained of color as the words sank in. "This can't be happening. Not now." Her grip on the counter tightened, her free hand bracing against the cool marble. Her heart pounded in her chest, so loud it nearly drowned out the distant music spilling in from the hall. She ended the call abruptly, staring at her own reflection in the mirror. Just moments ago, her makeup had been flawless, the perfect finishing touch to her bridal look. But now, it felt like a mask, an illusion that no longer fit the turmoil churning inside her. With unsteady fingers, she slipped the phone back into her clutch, inhaling deeply in an attempt to regain her composure. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, careful not to smudge her mascara, then forced a practiced smile onto her lips. Taking one last steadying breath, she stepped back into the reception, willing herself to push aside whatever storm had just been unleashed. As soon as she re-entered the ballroom, Noah's eyes found her. He could read her better than anyone, and while her smile was in place, it didn't quite reach her eyes. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Still, he reassured himself that whatever it was, it could wait. She moved toward him, her steps deliberate but lacking the usual effortless grace he loved about her. When she reached him, she rested a hand on his arm. "Noah," she murmured, her voice soft but steady. "Can we talk for a moment? Somewhere private?" His stomach tightened. Their wedding day, and she needed to talk in private? A faint alarm rang in his mind, but he pushed it aside and nodded, keeping his expression calm. "Of course," he said, leading her away from the crowd toward a quieter corner of the venue. As they walked, he noticed how tense she was. Her hand, usually warm and reassuring, felt cold against his arm. The once lively hum of the reception faded into the background as they stepped away, finding a secluded spot near the coat check. "What's going on?" he asked, keeping his tone light but unable to mask the concern creeping in. Sophia hesitated. Her gaze flickered away, and she took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling as though she were gathering courage. "Noah," she finally began, her voice laced with unease, "there's something I need to tell you. It's important, and I don't want to keep it from you." A pit formed in his stomach. The way she was looking at him, the uncertainty in her voice, it felt like the ground beneath him was shifting. "Okay," he said cautiously. "I'm listening." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, he saw nothing but love and vulnerability in hers. But just as quickly, something else flickered across her face, guilt. "I just got a phone call," she whispered. "It was someone from my past." Noah's brows knitted together. Someone from her past. "What does that mean?" he asked, his pulse quickening. Sophia bit her lip, looking as if the words physically pained her. "It's complicated," she said hesitantly. "I thought I had put it behind me, but it seems I can't." Her eyes darted around as if she were afraid someone might overhear. Noah's patience was thinning. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. "Sophia, what are you trying to say?" His voice was firmer now, his stomach twisting with unease. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "Noah, I never meant for this to happen," she whispered. "I love you. You have to believe that." "But what?" He heard the hesitation in her voice, saw it in the way her fingers twisted anxiously in front of her. "But what, Sophia?" he demanded, his voice rising despite his effort to stay composed. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. She looked smaller somehow, as though the weight of her own words had made her shrink. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "A terrible mistake." Noah's entire body tensed. His mind struggled to process what he was hearing. "What kind of mistake?" His voice was low but edged with urgency. Sophia opened her mouth, but no words came out. She hesitated, her expression crumbling under the pressure of the moment. The weight of whatever she was about to say pressed down on them, turning the air thick and suffocating. Whatever joy had filled the evening had drained away entirely, replaced by a cold sense of dread. Noah had no idea what she was about to confess, but deep down, he knew. It was something that would change everything. Noah's heart pounded in his chest, drowning out the cheerful music and distant laughter of their guests. The vibrant energy of the wedding had faded into the background, replaced by the suffocating weight of whatever Sophia was about to say. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her fingers gripping the fabric of her dress as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. She looked so delicate in that moment, yet her next words shattered any illusion of fragility. "Noah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need you to listen to me. This isn't easy, but it's something I have to tell you." A sick feeling coiled in his stomach, tightening with every second that passed. The unease that had started when she took that phone call had now grown into something unbearable. "Just say it, Sophia," he said, his voice harsher than he intended. "Whatever it is, just say it." She inhaled sharply, her lips quivering as she struggled to meet his gaze. "There's someone else," she finally admitted, her voice breaking. For a moment, Noah was certain he had misheard her. The word sounded foreign, impossible, from the woman he had just vowed to spend his life with. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice tight with disbelief. "I've been seeing someone else," she blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush. She bit her lip, her expression wavering between shame and a desperate kind of resolve. "It's been going on for 6 months." Noah froze. The world tilted around him, the once glowing reception now a cruel backdrop to the devastation unfolding before him. "You're joking," he said, his voice low and unsteady. "Please tell me you're joking." "I'm not," Sophia whispered, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I never meant for it to happen, Noah. I swear I didn't." But what?" he cut in, his voice rising, anger beginning to take hold. "We just stood in front of our friends and family and promised forever to each other. And now, you're telling me this?" She flinched at the words, her hands wringing together in front of her. "I didn't plan for it, Noah," she pleaded. "It just happened. I didn't want to hurt you." "Didn't want to hurt me," he repeated incredulously, shaking his head. His voice was thick with disbelief, barely able to contain the storm brewing inside him. "You're standing here, on our wedding day, telling me you've been cheating on me for 6 months. How could you possibly think this wouldn't hurt me?" Sophia's shoulders trembled as silent sobs racked her body, streaking her carefully applied makeup. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't want it to come out like this, but when he called, I realized. I couldn't keep living a lie. You deserve the truth." Noah let out a bitter laugh, the sound laced with pain. "The truth?" he spat. "The truth is you've been lying to me for months. The truth is that you let me stand there, like a damn fool, making vows you had no intention of keeping." She shook her head frantically, her hands reaching out, but he took a step back. "It's not like that, Noah," she insisted. I loved you. I still do, in some way." "In some way," he echoed, his voice breaking. What excuse could possibly justify this? Sophia's gaze dropped to the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not happy, Noah," she confessed, her words slicing through him like a blade. "I haven't been for a long time. And when I met him, he made me feel alive again." Noah stared at her, his breath shallow, his pulse deafening in his ears. This woman, his Sophia, the one he had imagined a lifetime with, was standing here, telling him that she had already chosen someone else. "Who is he?" he asked, his voice eerily calm despite the turmoil raging inside him. Sophia hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the bustling reception hall as if afraid someone might overhear. "It doesn't matter who he is," she said softly. "It matters to me," Noah shot back, his voice rising. "I deserve to know who's been sleeping with my fiancée while I was planning our future." She hesitated, her lips parting as if searching for the right words. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she finally met his gaze. "His name is Tyler," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's someone I met at work." Noah repeated the name under his breath, the bitter taste of it settling on his tongue like poison. "Tyler." A sharp pang of humiliation stabbed through Noah as the realization hit him. She had carried on this affair right under his nose, with someone he hadn't even known existed. The betrayal stung, not just because of her actions, but because of how thoroughly she had deceived him. Sophia reached out as if to touch his arm, but he recoiled, stepping back before she could make contact. "Noah, I never wanted this to happen," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "But I can't go through with this. I can't marry you when my heart is somewhere else. His chest tightened, the pressure building like a dam about to burst. Rage, heartbreak, humiliation, they all swirled together, threatening to consume him. Why, he demanded, his voice raw with emotion. Why didn't you tell me this before? Why wait until now, until the moment it would hurt the most? Sophia swallowed hard, her lips trembling as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I was scared, she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. I didn't want to lose you. I thought I could make it work, that I could bury those feelings and move on. But when he called tonight, I knew I couldn't. Noah shook his head, his jaw tightening. Her words only made it worse, she had a choice. For 6 months, she had chosen to keep him in the dark. You should have told me months ago, he said coldly. You had 6 months to end this. Instead, you let it fester. You let it ruin everything we built. I'm sorry, Noah, she choked out, her sobs coming harder now. I never wanted to hurt you. I hope you can believe that. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. His fists clenched at his sides, his nails digging into his palms. Hurt me, he scoffed. You've done more than that, Sophia. You've destroyed me. You let me stand up there, in front of everyone, and vow my life to you while you were planning a future with someone else. The muffled sound of laughter and clinking glasses carried over from the reception hall, a cruel reminder of what was supposed to be the happiest night of his life. The contrast between the joyous celebration and the devastation in this secluded corner made him feel like he was trapped in some twisted nightmare. Noah took a step back, shaking his head as if trying to wake himself up. I can't do this, he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. I need to get out of here. Noah, wait, Sophia's voice cracked as she reached for him again, but he didn't stop. He walked away, his mind reeling, barely registering the faces turning toward him as he re-entered the ballroom. The chatter and music dulled as guests noticed his expression, the raw, unmistakable pain etched into his face. Their smiles faded, curiosity and concern replacing their previous cheerfulness. But he didn't acknowledge them. He didn't care. Pushing through the crowd, he made his way outside. The cool night air hit him like a slap, but it did nothing to calm the storm raging inside him. Noah stood there, staring up at the sky, the stars above twinkling indifferently. The weight of her confession bore down on him, pressing against his chest like a vice. Inside, the celebration carried on, guests still drinking, still laughing, still dancing, completely oblivious to the fact that the foundation of his world had just been obliterated. His breath came in short, uneven bursts as he tried to steady himself, but nothing could erase the humiliation. The betrayal. The rage. For nearly 2 hours, he paced the parking lot, his thoughts spiraling in endless circles. From inside the venue, the distant sounds of the wedding grated against his ears. Every cheerful toast, every clink of champagne glasses felt like an insult. A reminder of the perfect illusion that had just been shattered. Sophia's words echoed in his head like a haunting refrain. I've been seeing someone else. I can't marry you. It burned. It burned. Not just the betrayal itself, but the sheer audacity of it. She had stood there beside him, smiling, laughing, pretending, letting him believe. She had allowed him to make vows, to celebrate, to love her while she had been sneaking around behind his back. And now? Now she expected to walk away, tell him the truth on her terms, and move on. No. She wasn't getting away that easily. The anger that had been simmering inside him boiled over. He could see it now, her explaining their sudden breakup to family and friends, probably twisting the story to make herself the victim. Maybe even painting him as the one who had failed her. No. She would not get to control the narrative. Noah clenched his fists, inhaling sharply. If she had shattered his world, he was going to burn down hers. He wasn't just going to leave. He was going to take the entire event down with him. With a new, chilling resolve, he straightened his jacket, adjusted his tie, and took a deep breath. Then, he turned and walked back inside. Inside the venue, the energy was still high. The band had taken a short break, and the guests were scattered throughout the room, sipping drinks and indulging in hors d'oeuvres. Laughter and conversation filled the air, the celebration still in full swing. Across the room, Sophia was back among the crowd, her posture composed, but there was a stiffness to her movements that hadn't been there before. Noah watched from a distance as she spoke with a group of friends, her laughter too light, too forced. Her eyes flickered toward the door every few moments, as if she were expecting him to reappear at any second. Good. She should be nervous. A familiar voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Hey, man. There you are. Noah turned to see Chris, one of his groomsmen, clapping a hand on his back. We were starting to think you'd disappeared on us, Chris added with a grin. Noah forced a smile, masking the hurricane brewing inside him. Just needed some air, he replied casually, swirling the drink in his glass. You know how it is. Chris chuckled. Yeah, I get it. Wedding day nerves. He glanced toward the crowd. You've got a great group of people here. Everyone's having a blast. Noah followed his gaze to Sophia, who had just accepted a glass of champagne from a waiter. Her elegant, polished exterior made his stomach churn. Say, Chris, Noah said, his voice deceptively even. Who's up next for toasts? Chris shrugged. I think your cousin Nicole is about to give hers. Why? Perfect. Noah's lips curled into a cold smile. I think it's time I addressed the guests myself. Chris gave him a puzzled look but nodded. All right. I'll let the DJ know to hand you the mic after Nicole's done. Noah didn't bother waiting for the formal announcement. Nicole stood and raised her glass, launching into a heartfelt speech about love, commitment, and the beautiful future Noah and Sophia were meant to share. The words dripped with irony, hitting Noah like a cruel joke. As soon as the applause began, Noah stood abruptly, grabbing a knife and clinking it against his glass. The sound rang through the hall, commanding attention. Excuse me, everyone, he said, his voice slicing through the chatter. The room fell into an expectant hush. Every pair of eyes turned toward him, their expressions filled with anticipation, waiting for the groom to share some touching words about his new wife. But his jaw tightened, his grip firm around the microphone, his expression hard as stone. I have something important to say. At the far end of the room, Sophia froze. Her champagne glass hovered midair, her knuckles white against the stem. The color drained from her face as her wide, panicked eyes locked onto his. She knew. She knew. Noah met her gaze but didn't stop. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, he began, his tone calm but deliberate. It means a lot to have our friends and family gathered to celebrate what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. His voice faltered slightly on those last words, but he pushed forward, the weight of his fury keeping him steady. Unfortunately, things don't always go as planned. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sophia's parents exchanged confused glances, guests leaned in, sensing something was wrong. Noah exhaled, his grip tightening on the mic. I found out tonight, he continued, his voice gaining strength, that the woman I thought I was marrying has been lying to me. The room fell silent. For 6 months, she's been seeing another man. A collective gasp spread through the crowd. Across the room, Sophia's hand trembled. Her champagne glass slipped from her grasp, shattering against the floor. The golden liquid splattered at her feet, but she didn't move. Her entire body was frozen in place, exposed under the weight of every set of eyes now locked onto her. The whispers started immediately, hushed, sharp, relentless. Some guests covered their mouths in disbelief, others exchanged shocked glances. Noah pressed on, his voice laced with bitterness. I didn't want to believe it at first, he admitted. But she confirmed it herself. And now, on what was supposed to be our wedding day, she's told me she wants to end things. The humiliation on Sophia's face was unmistakable. She took a shaky step forward, hands half raised, as if to stop him. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "Noah," she croaked, barely audible. But Noah didn't waver. She had her chance to be honest. Now, it was his turn. "Please." Noah silenced her with a single, icy look. "Don't," he said, his voice cold and unwavering. "You've had your say. Now it's my turn." The entire room hung onto his words, the earlier joy now replaced by stunned silence, a mixture of shock, pity, and sheer discomfort rippling through the crowd. Noah turned his attention back to the guests, his gaze sweeping over the sea of faces. "I won't pretend this doesn't hurt," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Because it does. But I refuse to let her betrayal define me. And I sure as hell won't stand by and let her lie to all of you while I stay silent." With that, he set the microphone down. The thud echoed through the stillness, the finality of the gesture sealing the moment like the closing of a casket. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, leaving the room in a state of chaos. Whispers erupted almost immediately, a rising tide of murmurs and shocked gasps. Some guests turned toward Sophia with expressions of disbelief and quiet judgment, while others awkwardly looked away, unsure of how to react. Sophia stood frozen, her entire body rigid, her face a mask of humiliation and devastation. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks as the crushing weight of what had just happened sank in. The dream day she had envisioned had turned into a waking nightmare. She could feel it, the heat of everyone's stares, the unspoken condemnation, the walls closing in around her. She had to get out. With a strangled sob, she pushed through the crowd, fleeing the room as her body trembled from the weight of her own actions. Noah didn't stop walking until he reached his car. Leaning against it, he exhaled sharply, his breath coming in ragged bursts. The cool night air did little to calm the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He knew the fallout from this would be messy. Friendships would be strained, gossip would spread like wildfire, and everyone would have an opinion. But he didn't care. He had taken control of the narrative. He had exposed her for exactly what she was, ensured that she, not him, would bear the brunt of the shame. Inside the venue, the celebration had dissolved into chaos. The wedding that was supposed to be a joyous occasion had become something else entirely, a spectacle of betrayal, scandal, and public disgrace. Sophia was left to face the consequences alone. The next morning, Noah sat at his kitchen table, staring blankly at the untouched cup of coffee in front of him. His head throbbed from a night of restless sleep, his mind reliving every moment of the previous evening on an endless loop. The anger, the humiliation, the betrayal, it was all still fresh, burning inside him like a wound that refused to close. He had to act. Reaching for his phone, he scrolled through his contacts and dialed the number of a lawyer a colleague had once recommended. Within an hour, he was seated in a sleek, modern office, across from a sharp-eyed attorney named Karen. She listened intently as he laid everything out, every painful detail. When he finished, she set her pen down, meeting his gaze. "So, you want to file for divorce immediately?" she asked. "Yes," Noah said, his voice firm, unwavering. "I want her out of my life completely. She betrayed me, humiliated me in front of everyone I care about, and I don't want her walking away from this unscathed." Karen studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Do you have a prenuptial agreement?" Noah leaned back slightly, exhaling. "Yeah. We signed one when we got engaged. She thought it was just a formality, but I insisted." His lips curled into a grim smirk. "Turns out, it was the smartest thing I ever did." A slow smile spread across Karen's face. "Good," she said, flipping through her notes. "That will make things a lot easier. The prenup is ironclad?" It is, Noah confirmed. She gets nothing. No house, no savings, no investments. Everything stays with me. Perfect, Karen said, closing her notebook with a satisfying snap. I'll draft the necessary documents today and have her served as soon as possible. Based on what you've told me, we'll ensure this process moves quickly. As Noah left the lawyer's office, a grim sense of satisfaction settled over him. Sophia's betrayal had cost him deeply, but she wasn't getting away without consequences. By the time he got home, he wasted no time. He gathered the few belongings of hers that had ended up in his apartment, tossed them into a box, and placed it by the door. Then, he picked up his phone and sent a single text message. Your betrayal has consequences. I've started the divorce process. Don't contact me. Meanwhile, across town, Sophia was falling apart. She was holed up at a friend's house, hiding, trying to piece together what was left of her shattered life. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, calls, texts, messages flooding in from family, friends, guests who had witnessed the disaster firsthand. Everyone wanted an explanation. But what could she say? What excuse could possibly fix this? She ignored every call, every message, letting them pile up like debris from a life she no longer recognized. None of them mattered. Noah's text was the only thing she could focus on. Your betrayal has consequences. I've started the divorce process. Don't contact me. Cold. Final. Unforgiving. When the divorce papers were served later that afternoon, reality finally crashed down on her. The legal wording was blunt and absolute, spelling out the harsh truth of their prenuptial agreement. She would walk away with nothing, no money, no property, no support. For the first time, the depth of the hole she had dug for herself became painfully clear. Desperate, she tried reaching out to Noah, pleading, begging, but was met with nothing but silence. When she attempted to go through mutual friends, she quickly realized they had chosen sides, and not hers. The sympathy they once had evaporated in the face of her betrayal. Even her own family, ashamed and furious, refused to offer help. The life she had taken for granted was gone. Within weeks, things only got worse. The relationship she had sacrificed everything for crumbled. Tyler, the man she had risked her entire future on, quickly lost interest once the reality of her financial ruin set in. With no security, no resources, and no stability, she became a burden, not a prize. He didn't offer to help. He didn't stay by her side. Instead, he distanced himself, fast. With no savings and nowhere to go, it wasn't long before the inevitable happened. Eviction. From a distance, Noah watched it all unfold. There was no pleasure in seeing someone he had once loved spiral like this, but there was vindication. This wasn't some cruel twist of fate. This was the life she chose. She had made the decisions that led her here. And while there had once been a time when he would have done anything to protect her, to keep her safe, that time had passed. By the time the divorce was finalized, her world was unrecognizable. Sophia bounced from one temporary shelter to the next, a far cry from the comfortable life she had envisioned for herself. And Noah? Noah moved forward. Though the scars of her betrayal would remain, he found peace in knowing that, in the end, justice had been served. Sophia sat on the edge of a cracked, weathered bench in a nearly deserted park, her phone gripped in trembling hands. Her fingers hovered over the screen, scrolling through old messages from Tyler, words that once felt like promises but now read like empty lies. Her life had been stable once. Comfortable. Secure. Now she was nothing. She had destroyed everything for a man who had vanished the moment things got difficult. For weeks, she had tried reaching out, calling, texting, desperate for answers. Only to be met with silence. Then, one day, the truth came from a mutual acquaintance. Tyler had left the country. Moved abroad. No warning. No explanation. No goodbye. Gone. She stared at the phone in disbelief, her breath shaky. How had it come to this? She had thrown away everything for him, her marriage, her future, her dignity, only to be abandoned. A bitter laugh bubbled up in her throat. It was almost poetic. She had betrayed Noah. And now, she was the one left behind. Her choices, once so reckless and thrilling, now sat like a weight on her chest, suffocating her. And in the depths of her regret, one thought consumed her. Noah. They had been happy once, hadn't they? For 3 years, he had been her rock. Steady. Loving. Devoted. The memories clawed at her, his laughter, his unwavering support, the way he had always believed in her. She convinced herself that if she could just see him, remind him of what they once had, maybe he would forgive her. Maybe they could start over. Maybe he still loved her. The evening air was sharp and biting, but she barely felt it as she made her way to his apartment. Her heart pounded with each step, the weight of desperation pressing against her ribs. She raised her hand and knocked, each rap against the door echoing through the dimly lit hallway. Come on, Noah. Please. The door finally opened. And there he stood. The man she had betrayed. His face was unreadable, a mixture of surprise, irritation, and cold indifference. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, his voice cut through the silence. Sophia, he said flatly. No warmth. No softness. His gaze was steady, distant. What are you doing here? She swallowed hard, her carefully rehearsed words slipping away under the weight of his stare. Her voice trembled. I made a mistake. I've realized how much I've lost, Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. Everything we built together. Noah stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his face unreadable. His silence was more unnerving than anger would have been. She swallowed hard, pushing forward despite the tightening in her throat. I know I hurt you, she continued, desperation creeping into her voice. I was selfish, and I let something meaningless ruin everything we had. But Noah, we were happy. For 3 years, we were happy. Tears streamed down her face as she reached for him. I love you, she pleaded. And I want to fix this. Please, just give me a chance. Noah didn't move. He didn't blink. And when she reached out, he took a step back, shaking his head. You don't get to do this, he said, his voice firm, steady. Her breath hitched. You don't get to show up here and act like everything can just go back to the way it was. Noah, please, she begged, her knees threatening to buckle beneath her. Her fingers twisted together in front of her chest, as if she could pray this away. I've lost everything. I need you. I need us. I know we can make it work again. He exhaled sharply, the frustration evident in the way his jaw tensed. Sophia, you didn't just hurt me. His voice was calm, but the pain beneath it was unmistakable. You humiliated me. In front of everyone we know. Her breath shuddered. You lied to me. You betrayed me. You broke every ounce of trust we had. His eyes hardened. And now you think you can just show up, say a few words, and I'll forget all of that? Her sobs grew louder, her hands clasped together as though she could hold herself together if she just tried hard enough. I was wrong, she choked out. I see that now. I'll do anything to make it right. Please, just let me prove it to you. Noah's expression didn't waver. His jaw tightened, his gaze cold and final. No, Sophia. Her breath caught in her throat. There's no fixing this, he said, his voice like steel. You made your choice. And now, you're living with the consequences. She shook her head frantically, refusing to accept his words. But we were happy, she insisted, her voice cracking with desperation. Doesn't that mean anything to you? For the first time, Noah's face softened, not with longing, but with regret. It did, he said quietly. Then his eyes darkened. Until you threw it all away. The finality of his words shattered her. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor, sobs racking her body. Noah stood over her, his face unreadable, but his decision unshakable. I deserve better than this, he said firmly. His next words cut through the air like a blade. Better than you. Then, without another glance, he stepped back and closed the door. The sound of it shutting was deafening. A wall between them. A line she could never cross again. Sophia remained there, crumpled on the cold floor, broken and defeated, as the weight of her choices crushed her completely. There was no going back. She had gambled everything, and lost it all. For Noah, it was over. Their story had come to an end. A chapter he had firmly and irreversibly closed.